what I'll do is I'll click it and I'll say let's go live, and then we'll be live, and you get a little sign that will say we're live. No, it's not. It's not live, is it?
It's got live. It's live there.
I'm just gaslighting you. You told us it wasn't live when it was. I was picking me nose. Welcome, ladies and gents.
Live. I'm going to go and put some trousers on, right? Don't be a second.
What do you need trousers for?
Why start now?
Yeah, trousers on. Nobody can see that. What we're going to be discussing today, folks, thank you for tuning in, is a question that all of us have had quite frequently, which is about getting into new relationships post narcissistic abuse. And I think this is a hot topic for a lot of reasons, not least because love and being in a loving relationship is a fairly primal need, and it's one of the things that makes life on this glorious planet somewhat more bearable. And post narcissistic abuse, it can damage your trust of other people, and that this can really sort of lead to self-isolation and falling out of love with love itself. Do either of you have any thoughts on that?
You've been practicing that because you said that really well.
Did I?
I know, it was far too polished.
No, I'm just a very, very, very good public speaker. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but I just am.
Toot away. You just keep on tooting. No, exactly that, mate. Exactly. As we have discussed prior, that is a major topic that comes up. Yeah. So, totally agree.
What do you think the main thing is? I'll fire this at you, Terry, first. What do you think the main thing is that leads people to that sense of bewilderment and sort of it feels to me like despair mixed with confusion around the issue of finding love again in the future? What do you think the primary cause of that is?
Well, first of all, they've experienced a lack of, an abuse of trust.
Yeah.
In their relationships. And what I've found is, just my headset. What I've found is there's an assumption there that they have to, when they meet someone else, they have to go all in again. Because most of the time they've gone all in with the trust, and the common reaction is, well, I can't trust anybody. How can I trust another person again? And they're assuming that they have to trust fully from the start, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And a really useful metaphor that I use often, and I think I've mentioned it before, certainly mentioned it with Steve, is if you think of your trust like a jar of marbles, right? And what they've done is they give their marbles to everyone, right? And they've been abused. They've taken the marbles.
Are you saying our clients have lost their marbles? Because I'm just going to have to.
Yeah, what,
Terry, could you move that mic closer to your mouth? I see you've got a headset that you bought at Asda for 12 quid there. It sounds like you're talking.
Asda 2 for 1, 12 quid. Got it?
Fisher Price. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. I never knew the early learning centre did microphones. So where was I? Marbles, yes.
Marbles.
Right. So there's an assumption there that they have to go all in with the trust, right? And the metaphor of the marbles is, for instance, let's say when you're starting off in new relationships, you don't have to give them the full jar. You can just a marble by marble, and as soon as anything, there's an assumption here as well. You've set your boundaries. You've sorted yourself out, if that makes sense. You've done the sufficient self-work to be able to go into another relationship, because that's imperative. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going from one mistake to another and repeating patterns. But then testing, okay, so there's a marble, I'll trust you with that. And as soon as any boundaries infringed, or as soon as you get a red light, no, okay, that's fine. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you're not jumping in, you're not, like a lot of people, I've seen it so many times, they go from a broken relationship and it's as though they cannot be alone. There's something wrong with being alone and just taking stock of themselves where they are, and they go into another relationship, and they make the same mistakes. So, is it making sense? By the way, my first making sense of the session.
Does that make sense? It does. It does. Steve, what do you think of that?
We're all along the same lines, I guess. I mean, it is natural in a way, isn't it? You know what? It's not just coming out of an abusive relationship. I think the end of any relationship, if it's been a bit significant, if it's, you know, and you've been together for a little while, then coming out of any relationship requires some recalibration and readjustment. Even if there wasn't a lack of a loss of trust, even if it was just the end of a relationship, you know, you try to figure out, what do I need to do differently next time? And I think while we've been talking, you know, all of us offline have been talking about this topic. There is that section on the program where, without, you know, giving any spoilers, where we talk about taking the time to just reflect and think about what is normal love for you. What are the parameters? What are the boundaries? And I don't mean, well, you know, we don't, on the program, we don't mean boundaries as in obstacles that aren't going to let anybody else in ever again. We're just talking about, you know, where are the edges of you and the other person that you're going to likely get into a relationship with. So I think when I first started going over that part of the program, and I know your video of it is a very personal account of your own life, Richard. I thought, you know, we sort of go through childhood and teenage, adolescence, and we start getting into relationships without any instruction manual.
Right.
Let's see what we can do here. What we have got, of course, is models from our parents and people around us, and maybe romantic movies we've watched or something, and we think it's all going to be a bit like that. And in a weird way, having to sit down and rethink what normal love is like is a very useful exercise to do. And it's just a pity we don't do it before we actually get into our first relationship. You know what I mean? We tend to just, and I guess that's the power of love, as they say. There's a song there. You've got to think about that. You know, because the other thing about this thing we call love, this thing we call intimacy, as we do know, it's a massive chemical hit in the brain, isn't it? It's that oxytocin rush and bonding and all the rest of it. So a little bit like what Terry said, if that gets smashed, it's like going cold turkey for a while, isn't it? It's like coming off, I guess, some drug or something, you know. So it's a very hard place to be. But picking up the point from the beginning of the thing, the beginning of the video clip, it is a thing that all humans strive to do. We do strive to have relationships, be in relationships, and all the rest of it. So it's useful to recalibrate and rethink about what those relationships should be like going forward. A bit like if you think of Terry's jar of marbles. No. How can I stretch this metaphor to infinity? What colour marbles would you want to put in your jar?
So maybe then, aside from narcissistic abuse as being the issue, there is just generally like an issue that maybe people need to, maybe this is something that we lack, that we're not trained to sort of think in terms of, well, what are our expectations around relationships? I do remember seeing an article just a couple of years ago now by a psychologist saying that they thought that people's resilience around love and heartache had gotten less. Like we're more inclined to put our whole self-identity on the relationship and on being in a relationship, and that heartache isn't just heartache anymore. It now becomes almost like an identity crisis. I can't remember the article, and I don't know what the evidence is for that, but I know in my own life that the loss of love and the break of a relationship, whether it was emotionally abusive or not, which is another element, did spiral into quite a strong fundamental in the foundation's identity crisis of who am I and what am I doing? And that's not great, is it? I mean, you can't have your whole sense of being and self-perception built around romantic love. I mean, it's building on shaky foundations, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think Terry mentioned this a moment ago, didn't he? Or the way I heard it, sort of coming through for you talking, Terry, was like, you know, be comfortable in yourself. Cliche time, but you've got to love yourself before you can love anybody else. Is that sort of joining these points together? You think?
To a degree, but what I'm talking about, if you've been through a traumatic event, you know, a traumatic relationship, but all right, yeah, we'll go back to any relationship. It's going to hurt. If you've been in a long-term relationship, whether you instigate it or not, the breakup or not, it does affect, you know, and your judgment's impaired, everything's, you know, you're not yourself. And I think before you go into any relationship, after that, you've got to take stock and get to a place where you feel whatever you want to, you know, where you feel good, you know, where you feel whole again, if that makes sense. You know, where you're not clutching on to another relationship. Does that make sense?
I think we're talking about the same thing. And again, you're not looking for somebody else to validate you as a person. You've got to be validated yourself. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think that's part of what we do at that. Is it around session 5, I think, isn't it, where we start talking about that, you know, defining what normal love is, defining what intimacy. It's not a scientific calculation. It's quite an intuitive process in many ways, but it is probably, I know when I've spoken to people on the program, it is the first time they've ever just thought about that thing. What is normal love, and what isn't it, and what have I made a mistake of thinking it was in the past? This is Richard's story, I know, but you know, it's the first time, and we're talking to, you know, adults in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. In fact, I've had some even older than that, and they say this is, you know, this is very cool. It's the first time I've sat down and thought about, and without that process, then maybe what you're saying before, Terry, they stumble back into a relationship to validate themselves, to feel as though they need to.
I would also say as well, it's with a lot of people, they take on what they think love should be, if that makes sense. Someone else's version of love, whether it be media, whether it be their friends, whatever it might be, you know. So it's and they go into a relationship with certain expectations. We all do, by the way, go in with expectations, and when those expectations aren't met, oh, hang on, you know.
So there are issues around our fundamental templates for what we think love should look like and what it shouldn't look like, and maybe everybody should do a little bit of internal boundary work, because a boundary is always a way of saying no. But if you have internal boundaries, it also gives you standards. So if you actually sit down and define love looks like this, this, and this, and it definitely doesn't look like that, that, and that, it can be a useful exercise, because if anybody falls below that standard, you can say, aha, this is not loving. So that's one issue. When it's specifically narcissistic abuse that's involved in the relationship, what is it that kills people's capacity to move forward and get into another loving relationship if they've been the victim or target of narcissistic abuse? Terry, you go first on that one.
Trust again, obviously, clearly. And also there's a damage of the self-image. Yeah. For years, for some of them, we're talking double figures years, 10, 50, 20 years, they've lived under this illusion that it's all about them, and they're somehow lacking.
So my experience was always in relationships that didn't last more than 2-3 years, but you've had clients that have been in marriages that were narcissistically abusive for 20, 30 years, haven't you?
30, 40 years, yeah.
I've had longer, I've had 40.
So it's it is brainwashing. It's simple as that. Brainwashed into believing that the catch-all, the most common core belief throughout the whole set of clients, be like, however way they phrase it, I'm not good enough.
Right.
You know? And
And
that's I'm not
do you
good
think
enough.
not? Do you think?
I'm not good enough for it.
Do you think specific to narcissistic abuse? Do you think it's specifically narcissistic abuse that fosters that belief in them that they're not good enough?
I don't think it's specifically narcissistic abuse, but what I do think, it exacerbates it. You know, no end. You know, so if you've got a general feeling, I'm not, you know, I'm not really good enough, which would then actually, logically, you may pick up someone with narcissistic tendencies, you know, just grab hold of, right? It can exacerbate it no end. You know?
Steve, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. When Terry started there, he said he went back to the word trust.
Yeah.
And the connection I made at that point was, trust in yourself as well. And maybe one little thing to add, we're using the word narcissistic abuse, and we, you know, of course we are, because that's the main core of the program. But actually, any sort of psychological abuse, any of the cluster B, or even if it's just outright bullying, harassment, you know, partner is on an ego trip or something, without having to diagnose clinically that it's narcissistic, it's psychological abuse, and it damages you. You know, the gaslighting. Gaslighting, I don't think, is just a symptom of narcissism. Gaslighting, people use it in other you know, situations as well. So you do become a little bit unsure. But okay, let's, in the narcissism or any of the cluster B type situations and relationships, then we've also, of course we do this in the program, we have to explore a little bit about family of origin issues, and you know, is this their normal? Is it because of their growing up and conditioning that they sort of, it's a bit weird to say this, but they sort of look for narcissistic relationships because that's their comfort zone, that's their normal, because that's the way they thought life was as they were growing up and all the rest of it. So one of the things they got to figure out is go back to the normal love again. What, you know, what would normal love be without those narcissistic influences, that whole, you know, the whole sort of comfort zone? The other thing that comes in, I guess, and again, topics we've talked about, is the other elements, like, you know, there's the love and the intimacy angle. There's the vulnerability that is required. So there's where it all gets a bit weird, isn't it? How do you become? You have to have vulnerability to be in a loving relationship. Vulnerability is not lacking in safety, though. Yeah, vulnerability is just giving yourself to that person where your boundaries are, not letting them trample all over you. That's not being vulnerable. That's not really vulnerable. So, what was the question?
You're coming through. You're coming through a little bit muffled now, Steve. Could you try? Can you try switching off your video and see if that improves the audio? It's the icon. Go on, say something again, mate. Oh, sorry, your videos.
Something again. Say something again. I've said something again. I'm still muffled.
Oh no, I can still see your video. So if you go to the,
I haven't turned it up yet. I thought you. Oh, wait a minute. I'm gonna.
And it's giving you a pair of glasses as well.
I put them on so I could see these. Right.
Who's that handsome fellow?
That's me. That's me older
that wasn't
brother.
taken 40 or 50 years ago. Well, I'll eat me out.
That's actually quite a bit clearer, that, Steve. I can hear you much more clearly. So one of the things, I can't see you, but we all have to make sacrifices, mate. You know what I mean? It hurts that I can't see you, but inside I see you. I'm here for you.
Okay.
Terry, he sounds distrustful right now.
Yeah, I'm losing trust in this thing. How come all of a sudden I get knocked out of the? I'm not happy.
To be vulnerable.
He feels vulnerable. That's good. Healthy vulnerability. One of the things that I've considered with like emotional abuse, cluster B abuse, narcissistic abuse inside of an intimate relationship is it can be a bit of a shock for people to actually have to come to terms with the fact that they've been in love with, they've been living with, they've been sleeping with, having sex with somebody who effectively is evil. And evil's not a term that's popularly used in therapy and counseling, but it's evil, it's moral evil. And they've invited that unwittingly, without consent, through deception into their home and lived with it. And I think there's a kind of a shock and a trauma to deal with and process the fact that you've actually loved somebody who is the clearest definition of evil that you can come across. And I'm pretty sure that must be something to do with what stops people from feeling good about getting into new relationships as well. Terry, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it would stop because they don't want to get hurt again. Simple as that.
Yeah,
but from the point of view of being involved, asking the question, how on earth could I get involved with someone so evil?
Yeah,
who would use me so much? They assume that it's a deficit on their part, a fault on their part. Often in the program, I encourage a switch of thinking. You know, it was never them. The very fact that for instance, they were open and vulnerable and kind enough and empathic enough to become a target of a narcissistic. If somebody of a narcissist, it's not their fault. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Did me changing position sort of mess with your head a bit then? Because you kind of slowed down and you started buffering. I could hear your brain going, "The fuck is he doing?"
Yeah. And what's he doing? Yeah.
Was it just my face just coming closer towards yours? It was like
that's scary in itself.
Freaking me out. Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point that you made. Steve, what do you think of that? The introduction of evil into the intimate space.
You need to get into the force field. It is, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting word, that evil, isn't it? You bring a word in like that, and you got to start thinking about all sorts of other dimensions of it. I'm going to pick up on Terry's point because I like that one better, which is it's not their fault. It's not their fault. Yeah. Pull faces like that. Hey, you can't see me, but oh shit, did you see that?
I felt it. I didn't see it. I felt it.
Feel this. Yeah. It is. It's not their fault. Okay, but it seems like it. These manipulators, the ones that we are talking about as narcissists and cluster B, and all, they are manipulators. They are experts at their job. You go to see a solicitor or an accountant. You want them to be experts at their job, and these people are experts. They con you possibly for their own gain. You weren't aware of it. Like Terry said, you were a normal, nice, kind, loving human being, so you didn't realize that they were just there to suck you dry and take your milkshake off you. So it's, but I know we can say this and it all sounds people will nod and say that's right. Doesn't make it any easier. It doesn't make it any easier to get over the fact but it helps you understand that you were taken advantage of. I mean, there's things on, what was this on the news yesterday? Is it 90 million or something pounds conned off people about pension scams?
Yeah.
No, more than that. It was more than that. People are being conned and manipulated all day, psychologically, physically, financially, and all the rest of it. And in a way, I feel as though that's what's happened to some of our people. Our clients, they've been very trusting. They've been normal. They've been in love. They've given part of the relationship. And often, it's years before they actually realize that things aren't the way they should be. So I'm not answering the evil question so much as the it ain't their fault question.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. The research indicates, the published research indicates that if you want to help people overcome trauma, you've got to help them alter their unconscious map of reality, because the world was one way before the incident. It could be a violent assault. It could be a sexual assault. It could be this kind of love fraud. It could be having money stolen from you. And then you've got to kind of accommodate this new world view, which is painful and unpleasant and nasty, which is where that element of evil comes in. So if I talk about accommodating new and ugly maps of reality, it's maybe a more effective way of framing it than saying it's evil. But it's essential. All the published research says if the therapy is going to work, that's what it needs to help you to do. Now, in the coaching that we do with people, and the style that all three of us have, is to be philosophical about their issues, about what's happened to them, and to just explore philosophically what the concept is so that they construct their own version of reality. How important do you think that approach is in terms of dealing with narcissistic abuse, being philosophical with the client? Terry, you go first on that one, mate.
I do revert back to, and I often quote Stoic philosophy.
Yeah.
And even straightforward critical thinking applied to self, applied to their own, and I'll use the word inner critic. Sometimes I've found it useful to, rather than use the word inner critic, use the word internal dialogue, and it's either useful or unuseful. Mm-hmm. If it's useful, leave it, let it go. If it serves you, let it go. If it's not useful, then challenge it. As you would challenge someone else, maybe someone outside of yourself. Something else, an aside, which again, I'm although it's slightly off topic, but it's really useful I've found my clients really useful to think about is when they're being challenged by the inner critic and they're getting hard time by the inner critic. I ask them to question whether the inner critic is actually, because it's built up through their own perceptual filters, their filtering system over time. Yeah, their inner critic is a result of their past history. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah.
So is your inner critic actually qualified to have that opinion of you? So when it's giving you a hard time, is your inner critic actually qualified? And invariably, it has to be no.
Yeah.
You know?
So you can actually create an internal dialogue. I don't know what you would call it, like a dialectical process between the ego and the superego, to go a bit fancy with the psychoanalytic terms, but where you're actually now, the ego now is challenging the superego, which is what the inner critic is. It's an inflamed superego, and going, well, how do you know that? And that in itself is a boundary. I think just the process of pushing back and going, well, hang on a second, I don't necessarily accept that message, and I'm just going to challenge you on that one and go, no, maybe that's not true. And how do you know that it's true? It not only does it create like an internal boundary, but it shows you at an unconscious level, this ain't me. That voice that's telling me these feelings that are saying, oh, you're not good enough, you're not worthwhile. It's not actually me. It's a part of me that's been hijacked through trauma. I think that's quite a useful an important part of the process of helping people recover from narcissistic abuse. Steve?
When I've taught it to my clients, that's been quite a useful tool about the feedback I've had.
Yeah.
He said it's been quite useful. Another thing I might add as well, what could cause a problem? There's an assumption when they feel for it, when clients say, oh, I feel so bad, how could I have been taken in so easily? How could they do that to me? There's an assumption that those people, those narcissists, think like them.
Yeah. Yes.
Does that make sense? Like a human being, if that makes sense. Yeah. And once you realize, well, no, they don't.
Yeah. Yeah, they've got a very, very different.
Absolutely, totally different worldview to the average client. And once they get a hold of that, even, it can shift the perspective.
Very true. Steve?
I'm gonna try and put my camera back on because I'm feeling really left out here. I'm starting to develop a little bit of a phobic response in a way.
It's okay, but we can only see you at like 6-second snapshots. Like CCTV. CCTV of a fight that you'd see on the door where it's like and then it's like that.
Is it still like that now?
It's buffering quite a bit, but we can hear you clear enough.
You could put your picture on.
I've got it on. I've put it on.
Use like a false chin that goes up and down.
Yeah. I did a speed test while you were talking, and the speed test come back as good. So never mind. And I suspect it's just an excuse that you don't want me to be in the room, but that's fine. That's fine. No problem.
No, I want you to feel vaguely excluded, but sort of half included, so that you're not quite sure whether you're being excluded. It's just a really clever gaslighting thing.
Keep you on the back foot.
Yeah. Somebody did say on a previous Google Hangout that because I'm the host, like if my signal isn't great, my signal is strong, but even in Thailand, even if you're like, I'm on 70 download and 70 upload, even when it's really strong here, it's still spotty, it still flickers. So I think because I'm hosting it and maybe I'm not fully stable, that's why yours is coming through. Because normally when I chat to you and it's just me and you, it's absolutely fine. So it could be this Google Hangout format.
So you're saying it's me?
I think that's it. I think, Terry, you're right, mate.
I'm comfortable blaming Terry. I mean, Steve, are you comfortable with that?
Well, you know what? I take full responsibility. Do you know why?
Because you're a scapegoat.
That's why. We missed that. I missed that. Anyway, listen.
I didn't quite get it myself, but I know it was an insult.
I just said because you're a scapegoat, that's all. Not really, though.
Oh, yeah.
Go on, Steve.
You said I was number 2, and now I'm sort of feeling like Terry's number 2. So anyway, let me take a deep breath and come back and answer your question. So where we're going, a couple of things Terry mentioned that I just jotted notes down a bit. This inner critic starts to, it starts to annoy me a little bit. This inner critic malarkey. I think we give this inner critic too much bloody airtime, too much responsibility. Even the title, critic, is like, it's not good, is it? I will often, if I'm trying to make a point with a client and we're talking about inner critic, jokingly call it the inner criticizer, because that's what we're bloody doing, isn't it? Always seems the inner critic. If it was a proper critic, it would talk about the good parts and the bad parts, like a critic of a play. Boom. So I call it the inner criticizer, which I thought of that when Terry came out with that nice little pearl of wisdom. You know, are they qualified? Is this voice qualified to say that? No, they're not. So I totally get that. The other point that came to mind, thinking as you guys were chatting amongst yourselves, and I'm just left to my own devices, was not bitter, really, not bitter. The people, the people who we see, the people. All right, let me try and get my words in order here. The people that we see because they come onto the program are self-selected, of course. They are looking for better things. They're looking for healing. They're looking for growth. They're looking for moving forward. So it makes our life just, I guess, a bit easier in that respect, because they've already started to find courage. They've already started to find a bit of determination to move forward. So, it's a case of capturing the essence of that. I think this is what we sort of find ourselves doing, capturing the essence of that and helping them to move forward again. What is it I say here, Terry? Does that make sense?
Don't steal my lines.
You've got to do a little finger point. Does that make sense? And you've got to be quiet. You've got to be quiet. You've got to say, does that make sense? Like that.
What about this? Can I do that? With the two fingers?
We can't see you.
Can't see you. What about that? I don't know.
He's got a voice.
Terry, I know that you see me all the time. I know you see me all the time, Terry. I know I feature in your dreams. I know.
In my dreams and my nightmares.
Somebody I was working with the other day is a professional musician, and he was saying about the inner critic thing, and he said, well, in my life I have been criticized by actual critics, and he says, so whenever you say inner critic, I actually think of actual critics. The inner critic thing, I think it must come from the Pete Walker book, and I think it's just better than saying superego, because if you don't. Like most people don't understand the Freudian analytic term, and if you say superego and you're talking narcissism, they'll go, oh, an ego that is really big and it's a super ego, like Superman. And then you're like, no, it's a translation from German, and not modern German. It's a translation from old German, and it means super as in literally above. So it's the ego above the ego, the superego. And then the
ego.
I don't know what the original was, but it probably was it Uber Ego? It might have been Uber Ego.
I don't know. I just thought they started throwing in
Uber Ego. No, it would have been.
Ego.
I'm just saying it's got to be Latin, so it will have been super. But actually, Uber Ego would probably help people get it better if they're thinking Freud and they're thinking German. If we say Uber translates to English as over, it actually is the over ego. But that's what super used to mean, but now it just means super, like Superman. So.
I'm being reminded here.
I think they just get it.
That film, The Vessel with the Pestilence, to prove that is true.
Oh, that's the only musical that I can tolerate in the world. I fucking hate musicals, but The Court Jester, I like that. The Vessel with the Pestle holds the brew that is true. The chalice.
Ego with the super ego.
The chalice from the palace is the one that is poisoned. It's
the malice.
Yeah, the chalice from the palace holds all the malice. The terms are important though, and this is something that needs to be fed back into the system in terms of what makes it easier for people to grasp. And as a general principle, I do think what could be easily explained to an intelligent 16-year-old is the right language to use, because it just goes in so much faster. So I did jokingly talk about a golem. Yes. As in like the character golem, but also the Jewish Yiddish concept of a golem that is created, which is, that's why Tolkien called it a golem. It's a greedy monster that we create that comes back and then feeds vampirically from us. So maybe it should be that. Maybe we should be talking in terms of golems rather than inner critics. Maybe.
Well,
People know that they know the word inner critic.
well.
Sorry, Terry. Go ahead, man. Say again, please, Terry.
Okay. There's another, again, because it really is sort of. What did he say? Is he having a go again?
No, he was actually politely letting you go first. It was remarkable.
Was he? Oh, right. Okay. Well, why? You know what? I'm getting paranoid.
It doesn't, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you.
What I was actually going to say was, and again, I try to. Well, I don't. I and all my clients are aware of this. Yeah, the language that we use has a direct effect on our nervous system, right? Yeah. So, for instance, when we use, for instance, the inner critic, or the inner critic's kick, starting, the inner critic, whatever perception they have of the inner critic, which is usually always negative, will have an effect on their nervous system, like the generalization of I'm never good enough, or I'll never get another relationship again. Now, we know logically that cannot be true, because it's a generalization and you can't see into the future. Doesn't matter, the brain is making things up, but the nervous system acts as though it's true. Does that make sense? So the language that we use, we need to be really careful. We need to be really careful. So if someone's got a negative, has negative connotations towards the term inner critic, then it's sort of
it's just creating unnecessary things.
That's right. Yeah, that's why I go for the internal dialogue. Internal dialogue.
Whatever position you're in now has made your £7 crappy Argos headset sound a lot clearer. You moved forward, and the wire that dropped out must have gone back in. You're so loud in it. Jesus, it's.
No, Teddy.
Stop. Stop. Too much.
So
let's
come
back to that. There might be people watching this who are thinking, "Oh, fabulous! I want to find out about love and intimacy." and as per usual, we've wandered off theme into the things we like talking about. So,
but they're just as important.
Does that make sense?
I'll see you later.
Okay. What are we going to be? What's some good sort of pearls of wisdom, I guess, or easy to digest?
You always, at this point, what you want to make sure is that we're offering something that people can take, that they can move forward with. So if they're stopping their own emotional flashbacks, they probably already had emotional flashbacks before the relationship through codependency, which caused them to be targeted by a narcissist. There's a free course on helping them stop their emotional flashbacks. They just need to go and sign up at SpartanLifeCoach.com on the email list there. There's a video, audio, and PDF course that lets them do that. Everybody needs to understand that is a technique that you do 5 times a day, every day for 2 weeks non-stop. You don't use it when you're in an emotional flashback, it won't work. You've got to train it ahead of time. The second thing is, most people have got the emotional literacy course, or they understand what the emotional literacy exercise is. Do it every day. Drill it every day. If you're emotionally literate, you're emotionally re-regulated, then your intuition will start to work again. It will switch back on, and you'll be able to trust your own perceptions of other people, and you'll know whether people are safe or not. Plus, you'll stop anxiously reaching out, trying to reattach to a new human being to stop the feelings of loneliness and anxiety. That is not a healthy start for a relationship. That's something that when I was talking to Chris Godinez once, we were joking and we started calling it dolphining. The idea that you jump out the water, out of a relationship, and then straight back into another one, and then out of that one and straight back into another one. It's dolphining without actually clearing the crap that goes in between relationships. So those are really, really important skill sets. And I would add to this, being emotionally regulated and being emotionally literate has an effect on the external world that is remarkable, to the extent that I would say in my own personal life, I haven't met and introduced into my life any new cluster B personalities in years. I've seen people who are clearly cluster B, but in the last 4 years, I haven't acquired any new cluster B personalities into my life because I just don't let them in. I'm not attracted to them. They're not attracted to me. We don't buzz off being around each other. I only figured this out a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, maybe this whole narcissism thing is overblown because I don't know anybody who's a narcissist anymore. And then I was like, no, that's a projection of the fact that you've made progress. So you've got internal boundaries, meaning me. That means you think that the world doesn't have narcissists in it. No, you're just filtering them unconsciously, like straight away. So I have zero new narcissistic personalities in my life for, I would say, since 2015. Nobody comes in, no new people. Everybody, I know tons of people have problems. I know tons of people are anxious, depressed, anger issues, whatever. But actual cluster Bs, they're rare. They're really rare. So if you find you're going on dates and you're like narcissist, only one of two things is happening. Either you're living in such a post-traumatic embitterment reality tunnel that you're completely paranoid and you're seeing things that just aren't there, or you really haven't resolved the core issues at all, and you're still unconsciously selecting and being selected by predators. If you think sharks are sexy, you're going to get bitten. That's just the way it is. Jump in at any time.
Well, we talk about, obviously, we often talk about the analogy with martial arts. And you were just saying then about doing the work, doing it regularly, consistency, doing the drills, not just intellectually understanding that it looks like it might work and doing it once, but getting into that habit of doing it and drilling. So the analogy, again, as we often say, back to the martial arts world is, guys come to class 2 or 3 times a week. They repetitively drill physical skills and techniques. Now, there's a sort of cliche hanging around here, but I know there's a truth in this. They appear differently in the world. Their communication, their physical communication changes, so they are less likely to attract the predator.
Yeah.
Target hardening, victim hardening, they are less like a victim. So I think that's what you were just saying there. And in fact, you use the word predator as well. We all know, that when people come to martial arts training, the better they train, the less likely they ever are to need to use the skills.
Well,
because they're communicating a different language.
Absolutely. I'm looking at myself right now. All I'm doing is doing Muay Thai, lifting weights. I don't drink. And I'm like, nobody gives me a bloody crossed look. I'm thinking, well, this is shit because I'm in good shape. I'm ready to go here. No fucker wants to start with me. I'm ready to dance.
Like learning to dance and not being able to go to the disco.
Exactly. And I'm walking around and everybody is just smiles and life is good. And I'm like, why do I even do Muay Thai? I mean, obviously I'm doing it because I like it, but it to the individual, it feels almost like the law of attraction and visualization and manifestation is true. That's how it feels. It doesn't mean that it is. I think that a hell of a lot gets processed unconsciously, and we feel like we've created a reality, and maybe we have in some sense, but not just in the mystical unicorn chi way. What do you think?
Interesting point, that. I mean, we're all aware of the research that suggests that we make up our minds between 4 and 7 seconds about a person. As soon as, within 4 to 7 seconds of meeting someone, we made up our minds, and then we look for reasons to validate that viewpoint. But also, depending on the research that you look at, our unconscious mind is already making that processing that information even about half a second before the conscious mind. The latest research suggests around about 6 seconds. So even going back to what we were talking about before, your physiology, your mannerisms, that would tend to keep away, using your analogy, martial arts, keep potential muggers away, if you like.
Predators,
we all know the psychology, or we all know about the research that was done a couple of years ago, that muggers tend to be able to pick out a victim by their psychology, for instance, walking near a wall rather than walking down the middle. But also from the viewpoint of what we do for with narcissistic personality disorder, as coaches, I've noticed that my tolerance level for people who are even slightly manipulative has gone way down. I just don't have it, and people don't do it. And the few people that I do know that maybe sort of on the spectrum of narcissism, they tend to keep away.
Maybe
that's what I've noticed in my experience.
There might be something to be said here for the power of unconscious total immersion, because you guys are doing, I do this all day, every day. You guys are doing 5 or 6 hours a day at least. And even though you're not saying, well, I should watch out for narcissists, every client you speak to is a poor human being who has suffered terrible consequences at the hands of a manipulator. So your unconscious is going to go, manipulators cost a lot. Their manipulations aren't, oh, they're just a bit annoying and, you know, they're a bit of a pest. No, they actually cost life in terms of years, and occasionally people do kill themselves as a result of it. So I think naturally your unconscious boundary and your sort of tolerance for it is going to alter, and you'd be like, no, this is serious.
Of course.
If you're gonna screw around on this, you'd probably screw around on that, and the cost to other people will be this. No, we're not playing that game. Absolutely not. We're not doing that. But maybe that's, even though we don't really talk about in terms of unconscious effects of total immersion, we do kind of have that in the course, which is why we keep it intensive. Is we want the client immersed in the subject, don't we? We want them doing the reps and really just almost mindlessly just committing to the process.
Absolutely, and as you said, I think that tackles on my famous trademark triangle. That tackles the safety line a little bit, you know, because unconsciously you are starting to develop, say, it's psychological self-defense, isn't it? By doing it, and again, I totally agree. I love the way the program is immersive, because it just occupies people's thoughts. If people aren't aware of this and they're watching for the first time, then, you know, we have the sessions, but in between the sessions, they got to do the drills. They've got to do the exercises. They've got to do the work as well. So it's so immersive, not just on screen with ourselves, but offline as well. And I do think that sort of forces out a lot of the other, you know, thoughts and rest of. And back to our martial arts analogy, they walk differently on the planet. Because I've got a clip of a BBC program that was done about 5 or 6 years ago, where they explored this, and they had citizens, half a dozen young guys. They happened to be men, and they put them in a room, but it was a blacked out room. They just had lights on their joints, so as they were walking around, you couldn't see them.
It was a motion capture study. It was a mate of mine who was the consultant for that, Lee Morrison.
Lee Morrison, indeed. Absolutely. Yeah. And that was it. So to, you know it well.
Well, Lee, for the sake of other people, if you could explain exactly what happened, that would be good.
Well, as you say, yeah. So they put these guys in a room, blacked out, just see the motion movie, and they said to Lee and the other guy who was with him, I don't know who that was, I don't know him, but he was there. Who's the victim? And they both picked him without hesitation. They both picked number 2. So they brought them out. Remember, they switched the lights on. I thought this was so. They brought the lads out and said, "Okay, any of you guys been assaulted in recent times?" And poor number 2 had been mugged 3 times in the last 12 months or something. He walked around like a victim. That didn't come across to people who wouldn't have seen it. So the motion capture is what that actor did for Gollum when he played Gollum. He wore a black stocking suit, and they had little like light bulbs all over his body to get where he was coming from. So these 2 lads, one's a security consultant, I don't know his name, and the other is Lee Morrison, who's a self-protection instructor who I know through the self-defense industry. And all they could see was the outlines of these guys in their motion capture suits. So they were looking at stick men. They weren't even looking at real people. They couldn't see facial expressions. All they could see was the gait, the way people moved, the curvature of their spine, and the set of their head. And without question, without fail, they accurately picked out who had been recently mugged just by looking. Because we're conveying so much more information than we realize. Like, we think we're a closed book, but we're actually very, very open, especially to predatory types who are focused on this and they're looking for it. So listen, just to close the loop on that, you know, as I recall, the video is they then, Lee Morrison and the other guy, who the consortium security, they took number 2 and they put him through just, I think, a day of intensive self-defense training. 1 day, possibly not even in 1 day, it might be 3 or 4 hours. And then they put him back in the room and ran the exercise again, but with a different crew looking in now, sort of a London street gang looking at them and said, who would be your victim in there? And this time, I mean, what I think he was picked, but not exclusively. They couldn't distinguish sufficiently, because in just doing the drills for a short space of time, he had already altered the way he presented. And that comes back to our guys when they come on the program, starting to do the drills, coming consistently doing them. They're going to alter the way the predators see them or don't see them.
I just want to add to that, just for the sake of self-protection, the postures that you want to be making when you're walking around if you don't want to get mugged. So we've gone from psychological and emotional mugging to actual mugging. What the things they look for are an erect spine and your chin being up and your viscera, the front of your body, being open. So because this is where all your guts and internal organs are, the more wounded, the more frightened you are, the more you'll cover it up. If you're strong and confident, you don't cover your viscera, you don't cover your internal organs. You stand up straight and open, and you look at what is in the environment. So they'll look at you and they'll be like, is that person switched on and externally focused? Are they seeing people over there, a car there? Are they looking around? Or do they have their fucking headphones in, this thing in their hand, walking around doing this? This is not good. Don't walk down the street like this. That's not good. That'll get you fucking picked. In fact, these things, when you're walking around, should be banned altogether, because you're a nuisance for the people walking around, mainly me. Now they're either going to get slapped.
So anyway, about love and intimacy.
Sorry, Terry, go on.
So anyway, about love and intimacy.
Sorry, Terry, I went into an emotional flashback there. I need to think that.
I've got this.
There is a relevant point. Terry's right to get us back on track, but there is a relevant point about doing the drills. Shut up. Doing the work. Doing the exercise. You know, doing what you're doing.
To what goes on in a client's life, if you like. I mean, for 30, 40 years, or about 10 years, they've been conditioned. Because that's what it is. It's conditioning to act. It's gone into autopilot. It's an automatic, unconscious reaction to the life they've had. With the narcissist. Does that make sense? Now,
they've been a professional victim at that time.
That's right. Yeah, they don't know. They don't know anything else. Now, something I've put across in the courses, because when we talk about, because we're talking about neuroplasticity here, aren't we? The brain's ability to create a neural pathway so that the response becomes natural. It doesn't have to think about it. Boom, 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 boom. Now the conditioned response with living with the narcissist is not being useful. Right? Now, and a couple of times I've had a client say, well, is it going to take me 30, 40 years to unlearn this? No, absolutely not. And the analogy about the martial arts is spot on. One day of training, proper training, and going over and over and over and training in the brain, right, can wipe out that 40 years of conditioned response. I'm not saying one day, but certainly, and we both know, we three of us know from personal experience, it can have one hell of an effect. 6 days, a 6-day course can have one hell of an effect on our clients' well-being.
I don't know. I've never worked with a client for 8 hours non-stop, but I imagine you probably could get, if we take your use of the word day and take it literally, if the three of us did one client on a 2-hour rota for 12 hours, I mean, they would have a full nervous breakdown. But if they could withstand it, you would get a lot of change. I mean, because what lays down the new neural pathways is usually trauma or repetition. Well, that experience of a 12-hour sort of coaching session would be traumatic, in inverted commas, enough to actually do some deep change work. I mean, you how could you not change when you're just focused on that one task non-stop for 12 hours? What were you going to say there, Steve? Sorry.
I've forgotten.
That wasn't what it was.
I think all I would say, guess, is we talk about these analogies, we talk about martial arts, we talk about these, all these. You've got to employ the Goya principle, the GOYA principle, or none of it works. Did you say?
Yeah.
What is Goya?
Get up.
Get off your arse and do
He's
it.
a painter.
Take action. Do stuff.
Yes.
You know, intellectualizing all of this, nah, well, not going to work. You've got to take action. You've got to do stuff. You've got to do the drills. You've got to do what Richard just said before. Sign up for that free little, course thing that's going on there. Watch the videos. Even that, it's like you can watch martial arts YouTube clips for years. You've got to step into the room, haven't you? You've got to start to feel the visceral experience. So it's like with our guys as well, do it. If you want to get back into loving relationships, you can't just wish for it to happen. You've got to start doing stuff. You've got to train, drill, do all the things that are necessary to equilibralize. Is that a word? The triangle.
It is now.
You got to get that triangle back in rocking triangle again. Vulnerability, intimacy, and
Could you switch your video on and tell people who didn't see your last video what about the triangle as far as relationships go?
Haven't I just said that? Didn't I just tell them?
No, you didn't explain the triangle.
So my analogy for the triangle is it's a three-side. Yeah, okay. All triangles are three-sided. Let's get that out of the way. It's an equal side. You see, if you could see me, I'm doing it with my fingers. I'm doing it with my fingers. Here now, see that? Three sides, three triangle. Yeah. Thanks, Terry. Can you do the triangle for me, please, Terry? No, just that's it. Richard's got it, of course. One side is
just give Terry a second, okay? He needs to think. Right. Illuminati confirmed.
And when you look through the triangle, and as you start to see that love coming back into your life through that triangle, how does that feel inside of you as it rises up? That was Terry speaking then, not me. Right, the triangle has three sides: intimacy, vulnerability, and safety. And my analogy is those are the three main components of establishing a loving relationship: intimacy, vulnerability, and safety. And if you just imagine that what you're reaching out for, what you're doing, has those components in place, what happens, I guess, with a lot of the people who come onto the program when they first come on, before they start to heal, is the vulnerability goes down to zero because they're never going to be vulnerable again. The safety stretches out for miles because they're always going to be protecting themselves. That is no longer a triangle. There's no room in there for the intimacy bit. So you just got to keep, the analogy, and I'll use it with clients all the time, and over the course of the 6 sessions, I ask them to start to think about how they would rebuild that triangle so they have the right level of intimacy, the right level of vulnerability, and the right level of safety going on in their life as well. So, and I go right back to the start to Terry's analogy. I suppose giving all the marbles away in one go is irresponsible and going to land you back where you started. So, absolutely.
So, helping people to recover from the trauma that they've already experienced, to get emotionally regulated, to become more emotionally literate, and to realize that there is no love and there is no intimacy without vulnerability. Like, if you think you're going to self-isolate and stay hidden in your little cave, and that the love of your life is just going to meet you there,
that's right.
But we got some bad news for you. Can't really happen. Similarly, don't leave the cave when you're not ready. Don't push yourself into a new relationship because you're trying to drown out feelings of anxiety, depression, and despair. That's not emotional literacy, and that's not emotional processing. Own your emotions, acknowledge them, breathe properly, heal, trust in the process, trust in yourself. Your body heals, your mind heals in the same way. And if you let it do its work, you'll come out of it a different person who has transcended the trauma. What do you think, Terry, about transcendence here, fella? You know what I mean, lad?
I love a nice bit of transcendence, mate.
I love transcendence, kid, eh? All day to death.
Terry's on a higher plane anyway. By the way, you know what? Just listening to you rabbit on about that in a loving way. We're coming at this from people who've suffered psychological abuse, narcissistic abuse. I think it's pretty relevant to every human on the planet. We've got to have a sensible view of relationships that we're getting into. Have we got our triangle? You know, if we ain't, I think I'm going to start making triangles and selling them, because I think we should all have our own triangle.
They're called Toblerones, Steve. They're already out.
Oh, bloody hell. Trust me, always late.
All the best ideas are already taken, mate. Do you know what I mean? They're already taken. There's just no point. I hope they have Toblerones in America, or the comments are just going to be, what's they saying in their funny Irish Australian accents that they've got there? Toblerone.
I actually suspect everyone's gone anyway.
Yeah, there's nobody watching this. There's nobody watching.
Yeah.
We've got past that. Yeah, we're going to get all we've got from these. See what else.
So there was this actually came out of one thing that we wanted to make clear for people. Like at the moment, we're giving people taster sessions. Gary and Steve. If you want to jump on them, there is a waiting list. I'll put it in the information under the video, and I'll open the doors for that again next Monday. It is just a taster session, though. This isn't the course. The course is a 4-week, 6-session intensive thing. And you might go, well, if it's only 6 sessions and it's over 4 weeks, that doesn't sound that intensive. Yeah, you've no idea. You've no idea what we expect you to do in between the sessions. It's a lot of work. It's challenging and it's hard. I'll just say that up front. It is difficult. It requires that you be willing to commit. The reason it's designed that way is because it's somewhat, that's not traumatic with a capital T, but it breaks you out the comfort zone, and it breaks your habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and action taking. And inside of those 4 weeks, you're working with Steve and you're working with Terry and you're doing the coursework that I've designed for it. We can get you a very, very long way. I mean, the feedback that we've had from the 6-session courses has been, it's amazing, really. We've got people saying that their whole lives have done a full 180-degree turnaround. You know, they were moving in one direction that they weren't very happy with. They came into the course with some reservations, not sure what was going to happen, and they walk away with a completely new sense of self and a lot more hope and a lot more optimism. Is that fair, do you think, to say about the feedback we've been getting?
I do, mate. And you know what? And you're right to position the 1 hour as like a taster, but actually there's been, I'm sure you've had loads as well, Teddy. There's been some really good feedback about the 1 hour. You know, the 1 hour thing. And not everybody goes on to the 6 sessions. A fair portion do, but I think get a lot out of the 1 hour just by itself. And of course, it allows them to just get a feel for, put a toe in the water, and you know, some people can just jump out of their comfort zone and go for it, and some people just need to take a baby step first. But yeah, I've had some really good little bits of feedback about the 1 hour. I'm sure you have as well, Terry. We've been talking about it, haven't we? So, Johnny, you can't. Go ahead, mate. Go on.
This morning was a case in point. There was a person I was working with. I'll use her words: crippling anxiety.
Yeah.
But just have to use a bit of basically critical thinking and pulling out the unconscious process of how she creates anxiety. She'd never done it before. My favourite question is, okay, how do you know when to have it? What's the first step? What's the second step? What's the third step?
Yeah.
And she didn't know when she started to pull it apart. You know, put it this way: she was able to do something there and then during that 1 hour that she hadn't done for a long time.
Again, you know what? That makes me realise, going back 5 or 10 minutes when we were talking about that BBC program, you know, the self-defense type things. They took that victim guy for, I think it was 3 hours training, deep immersive. So that's like our 1 hour, and he made progress. Now, obviously, if he'd have then decided this was something he wanted to do for a longer period and he started training regularly, he'd make more progress. But again, you know, it's about, people do make progress in the 1 hour. They make, or the light bulbs go on, if nothing else. They start to realize things about how good they are at procrastinating, how expert they've become at procrastinating.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the issue, doesn't it? I mean, I like to moderate people's expectations, and then if they come in for an hour and I go, well, you know, it's a taster session, it's a little reality check. If you've not had much help with ongoing issues with CPTSD, it'll give you a foothold. And then if we do something awesome with them, then that's even better. But I am a firm believer in, you know, just having an ally enter that space with a problem. And inside of just 45, 60 minutes, I mean, sometimes I do Instagram lives with people and I chat to them for like 15, 20 minutes, and you can get something, you can move something just through going, you know, have you thought about it this way? Have you considered that you're doing this? Or you're running, I can see that you're running that belief. You see that belief right there? If we just dial that down, how does that feel? How, you know, you can actually get pretty profound results in a short space.
The well-placed question at the right time can flip someone's perspective. Totally.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's the first time they've spoken to another human being on the planet about the things they've carried around in their head. That in itself, just saying the words out loud to another human being and hearing yourself saying them, and so you know, it does work. It does a lot of good stuff. So yeah. So what are you doing? Did you say you were opening up the 1 hours again, Rich?
Yeah, I'm gonna. What day are we on now? We're on Wednesday. I think I'm going to be trying to get back to the UK for this weekend. I want to be back in the UK before I open the doors again, just so I know I have good internet.
Yes.
So Monday or Tuesday of next week. Let's give it a date. Let's see. He's put me on the spot because he knows I have to commit now. Let's do it the 21st of next week, which is a Tuesday. I'll open the doors again, but just to moderate people's expectations, that there is only Terry and Steve doing this. So there's a set number of people we can take. If you join the mailing list, I'll mail out at like let's say it will be 4 o'clock in the afternoon UK times. And then if you are going to do it, you probably do need to respond quite quickly to that. If you miss it and you're absolutely desperate, send me an email and I'll try and fit you in. But it really depends on what, because you know, both Coach Steve and Coach Terry do other stuff as well. So we'll try and accommodate people. But if you're going to do it, jump in.
That was part of my thinking there, just to ask you while I got the chance. That so we need to start thinking about opening up more slots in our schedule. To accommodate. You know what it's like. You know, like every time you open the doors, there is quite a rush, and we end up putting people on waiting list. So as of next week, I'll open up more slots.
Yeah, if you don't mind, then I'm also aware that we're getting towards the end of August as well. So go on, Terry. Sorry.
I'm just to suggest to Steve that he opens up the 4:30 in the morning slot. Very popular, believe me.
I'm busy, mate. I'm usually busy at 4:30 in the morning. I do this thing. It's a bit weird. I call it sleeping.
That's some weird new age alternative therapy or something, like fasting, sleeping.
It's like fasting. Yeah, it's like fasting. It's like fasting from work. I think 4:30 in the morning.
Fasting from reality. I take an 8-hour fast from reality every fucking day. Works wonders. No, Terry will speak to you at 4:30 in the morning UK times, but both Steve and Terry are flexible. So it doesn't matter if you're in Australia, New Zealand. We actually haven't had a client yet, have we, where we weren't able to align them?
Absolutely not. No. Absolutely not. No, we get everybody. It's quite weird when you're talking to somebody. It's like it's pitch black outside my office window, and I'm looking at somebody, and the sun's shining in through their window. Yeah.
If you do sign up, guys, we use something called Calendly. So if you get with Coach Terry or with Steve, they'll send you a link through that says, okay, these are the slots I have. Calendly translates that into your local time zone. So you're just looking at your own time zone. So you'll just be going, oh, okay, I can do then, or then. And we found that to be, it's just the slickest way of... It
works very well. It works very well. One word of warning I would say is if you sign up, then book your slot. Because you sign up and then you get sent the link. And I've had people, they've signed up, they've got sent the link, and they've waited a week before they've tried to book a slot, by which time all the slots are gone for the next 2 weeks.
or just book one slot.
Yeah, just if you sign up, you'll get a response really quickly within an hour or two or whatever we can get it. Once you get that response, just go onto Calendly and book the slot in.
Yeah,
and it will Calendly, just to pick up Richard's. Richard found this tool. It works really well. Calendly takes care of time zones, so you just book one that works for you. If it says 9 o'clock in the morning, you just book it. If that happens to be 6 o'clock in the evening for me, or for Terry, or 4:30 in the morning for Terry, Calendly takes care of it all.
Yeah.
What's the earliest you do, Terry?
R4.
R4, you are a flipping trooper. I don't think. Listen,
I actually enjoy it. It's great.
What's the latest you do at night time? What's the latest you do night time, UK time?
10 p.m.
Yeah, I go through till 10.
But I do have a block in between. I do have a rest. Like for instance, certain blocks of time that I block out. To eat.
To eat. Can I just say for people watching, I don't ask them to do this. They'll be thinking, God, he's horrible. Why is he making it? They get to it whenever they want. That's.
Richard, I don't think they need any excuse to know that you're horrible, mate. I think they just know that.
It's pretty clear. I mean, I've taught them to be perceptually astute, so they can see evil. They know evil when they see it. Okay, guys, should we wrap it on that one? Is anything either of you would like to add before we close?
See, I'm going to bloody come on now. I don't care. I'm not missing the closing credits.
Okay.
Even if I am moving slowly and gracefully.
Is this going to be the Easter egg at the end of the?
When you move, it looks like I've taken acid. Everything is just tracing around as you.
You said you were going to stop that. Remember?
Oh yeah. No, I know, but I can't get through a day without a few dabs of flipping strong psychedelic. That's a joke, ladies and gents. I do not take drugs other than caffeine, which I flipping love way too much. All right, guys, we'll stop there. Thanks very much for jumping on. And ladies and gents, they're open from Tuesday next week. If you want to jump on with Steve and Terry, that will be available for you.
Nice one. All right. Look forward to seeing some people.
Yeah, so do I.
See you guys.
All right. Thanks very much. Cheerio.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Bye.
That's the broad.